Cheers, guys. Epics911, welcome to the Elitist Geek VR news for Sunday, September 11th, 2016. And lots to talk about on the VR front. A little bit of preamble, some important stuff to me that I want to share with you guys just in the preamble before we get to the news. So let's dive right in. So one of the things I've always wondered as a YouTube viewer, when, YouTuber A talks and shows game B, do they truly feel that way about that game? Or are they sponsored behind the scenes? Is somebody slipping them money? Is somebody giving them something free with the implied meaning being you're going to say something favorable about my game? It's why you can say whatever you want about a YouTuber like Boogie2988. It's why I have a lot of respect for him, because he's always been, at least in that regard, I can't comment on other things, but I've always felt he was honest in mentioning when a product is being sponsored, when there's some form of payment, or services switching hands. He's always announced it. And it makes me more comfortable watching his videos, knowing that I'm probably getting his point of view, he's been gaming as long as me because he's in my age group, his opinion about a game, right? Now, the reason I say that is I have noticed, and I am a small fry in a very big ocean. There's no illusions of grandeur, but what I have noticed since I crossed the 1,000 subs is indie devs reaching out to me. I can only imagine the pressure on YouTubers who have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of subs. And I've received about 12 emails to date from indie devs. And they all kind of follow the same template. They're all polite. They all offer me a free Steam key for their game and ask that I show it on my YouTube channel. Now, to be fair, they've never asked for anything. Hinted that it has to be favorable if you're going to take this free key. But let's face it, guys, human nature being human nature, nothing in this world, and I've learned this after 40 plus years on the planet, is truly ever free. If something's free, trust me, somewhere along the line, you're paying the piper. You might not be paying the piper then, but you will be paying the piper at some point. It's not something I will ever do. It's not something I feel comfortable doing. In all 12 instances, I've said no. I prefer to buy the game with my own money because I want to be honest about the game. If I don't like it, like Cyber Threat, I could not have slept with myself, guys. There's just no way I could have been able to put my head on my pillow saying good things about what to me amounted to a pile of turd. That's how bad that game was when I tried it. I understand it's gotten better, and I may revisit it at a future date. But I always want to be able to keep it real for you guys, and that means I will never accept something like that. I never have, I haven't lately, and I never will. It's just not going to happen. So just want to throw that out there. Maybe you don't care at the end of the day, but I just want people to know when they hear my opinion, it's really my frickin' opinion. I'm going to be honest, right? When I say it's always about the game, I mean it's always about the game or the experience, regardless of the platform. Because if it sucks, I want to be able to sleep at night, and I want to be able to say it sucks. So I just throw that out there just to let you guys know moving forward. It doesn't get talked about a lot on YouTube, but it happens. Like I said, I can only imagine as you get bigger how much more intense that gets, right? The next little thing I wanted to talk about has to do with some more kind of how-to content and tutorial style. I know most of you are as versed or more versed than me in the tech side of things or on the tech side of things. I get that, but I get asked a lot of questions about things that I could and should be making videos on. So expect more of that type of content too for those of you that are interested. Doesn't replace the news or the quick looks or any of that. It's going to be an addition to, and it's going to talk about stuff like settings, like best bang for the buck, video cards, because the entry-level question, I get asked that a lot. Is a 970, should I get a 1070 instead of a 970? And I usually give the same answer. If you want to kind of be more future-proof, yeah, you want those Pascal, type things that Unreal Engine 4 takes advantage of, etc. So more of that content coming too. With that said, guys, thanks for hearing me out, and let us dive into the VR news. There is some awesome artwork coming out of the Tiltbrush community. I'm going to post a couple of static shots here. The link that I'm going to include has some really cool videos. They, run from anywhere from like a minute to a few minutes each. And they got to be seen to be believed. Like, some of this stuff is just so atmospheric, so amazing, and it's unique to Tiltbrush. I remember having an old program called Deluxe Paint, which was the shit back in the day on the Amiga, the first VGA PCs. You had Deluxe Paint with the golden King Tut, bust on the cover. You were the shit artist-wise. Like, that was an awesome program. And it had rudimentary kind of animation built in. And as the Deluxe Paints, successive iterations of the product came out, that animation got a little bit better, to where eventually it was almost like you could create your own cel-shaded animation, right? Very primitive compared to professional tools, but it's something you could do. Tiltbrush is kind of like that, but on steroids. It is awesome what people are doing with music, animation, and just some really awesome, admittedly psychedelic style art, but really cool. To me, just as somebody who loves and appreciates art, I think it's fantastic, and it's just another outlet for creative people to be creative. So if you haven't paid much attention to Tiltbrush, if it's kind of been put to the wayside, it was one of your bundled in with your Vive, take a look at what people are creating. And not saying you could create that, maybe you could, but it just gives you an idea of what people truly are capable of doing with Tiltbrush. Very cool stuff. Next up, we have Gleech. Gleech is a Swedish company, and they have been working on a virtual grasp technology. So this was an article on Road to VR. You can also find information on Gleech's own website. The reason I wanted to talk about this is not the technology itself, but the vagueness with which it was presented in the article. And I'm not blaming the author at all. This is not about blame. This is just about, possibly he couldn't get the information. Because if you go to Gleech's website, they're all too willing to talk about their technology, but they don't really tell you what it does. So let's kind of get into it. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of background and you'll see what I mean. So they call their technology, quote unquote, virtual grasp. And their aim is to deliver realistic hand animations with objects in a game or experience. And they are willing to work with devs, is kind of the sales pitch, to make that happen. It's almost implied with the article name that this is somehow the same type of thing as some of the haptic feedback gloves. And that's where I want to just kind of urge caution, because it isn't. If you kind of read deeper into it, it's more a finishing touch style technology than it is the actual, haptic feedback glove style that some companies are working on, where, like that exoskeletal type glove, which will make your fingers with hydraulics or pistons or whatever servos stop mimicking you holding an object. No, this is more the final animation. And here's where this comes into play. Play a game like Vanishing Realms. Mostly your hand looks like a mannequin hand in those games, right? You've got your hand in the open position like this, and then you've got the holding animation like that. And there's no in-between. There's no finishing animations that look realistic based on the object you're interacting with. That's where Gleech comes in. So what they are going to try to do is touch up that finishing animation. So let the companies working on the haptic feedback gloves worry about, stopping your fingers at a certain point, Gleech will make sure that that looks realistic. So they say that they do this using a predictive and adaptive algorithm, which, as they put it, analyzes the physical properties of a virtual object, deciphering the most appropriate and realistic grip formation for the in-game hand model and snapping to that position. So if you read that, which didn't really figure in the original article prominently, that's the gist of what they're offering. And I think that's cool because, like Vanishing Realms and pretty much every other game, you basically have open and closed. It's like you're working with the ultimate binary system. It's a 0 or a 1 state. That's it. Gleech is giving you all the in-betweens. Holding a banana looks different than holding a bat or a knife or a gun. So very cool potential, and they can slot it in on your already almost finished product via their software, which again, they don't get into a lot of detail on. I imagine you'd have to reach out, speak to them, and get a better idea. I wish they would explain more of that on their website. I've sent them an email urging to do that because it's all kind of vague at this point and definitely not scam territory. I'm not even trying to apply that. It's just you don't really get a sense, if you were a dev, how they're going to accomplish it, because saying something uses a predictive and adaptive algorithm doesn't really tell you much. A lot of software uses predictive algorithms, right? Just simple AI systems. So if then is the ultimate predictive statement, and hell, Basic was using that back in the 70s. So there's some videos on there that show it. Check it out. It looks cool from a finishing point of view. I think it's going to add that extra kind of little touch. And there's an article a little later we're going to talk about that talks about VR commandments, and this will kind of come up again. Next headline, this one from Upload VR, and the author asks, will Sony become the new king of VR? Now, you guys have heard me kind of go back and forth, but one thing I've been consistent on is how important it's going to be for Sony to be successful at VR. And it was the main reason I was so disappointed with that PS4 Pro. As I laid out again yesterday, I still feel it is woefully underpowered to deliver what they want to deliver. And if you go to this site, the reason I'm mentioning it is not the obvious statement that the author makes, will Sony become the new king of VR? But one of the comments in the comment section, if you scroll to the bottom of that, there's a comment from someone from Sony, and it's Dr. Richard Marks. He's director of Sony PlayStation Magic Lab. So one of the people working kind of on the animation side, I imagine, art, assets, that type of thing. And he was answering somebody in the comment section that basically said, look, if it's not as good as Vive or Rift, I'm not going to buy it. I don't want to just have basic 1080p. And he jumps in, Dr. Richard does, and says, well, we have 3 subpixels per pixel for true RGB as opposed to our competitors. And if you research it, they do use 2 subpixels. Basically, what he's saying, if you don't understand the technical there, is it's going to be richer on Sony. Of course, he doesn't mention the other part of that. So he says, yeah, it's going to be a richer picture, but my concern of yesterday still stands. It may be a richer picture, but it's going to be a much more simplistic picture. It's going to have lower textures and a lower polygon count. So, yeah, you might be getting more in this department, but you're definitely losing. There's negatives to that too. So I mention that just in case it's an article you've read, or for anybody who got excited about that. It's still reason to be excited. It's great that they support 3 subpixels. RGB, true RGB, it's the reason my arcade cabinet has a real arcade monitor in it, is that LCD screens don't match the original refresh rate, for example, which was very low, under 60 hertz. Most of those games were 15, 24 Mortal Kombat, and then 31 for your standard later arcade VGA style games. playing those on a modern LCD just doesn't look good, in my opinion. The CRT in combination with that lower refresh rate and true RGB just makes everything look richer, subtle, the palettes work. Take a game like Spy Hunter, the car looks pink on an LCD monitor. On the true arcade monitor, it's deep, beautiful red. So that all applies to the VR side of the equation too. Yes, you're going to get probably a richer picture, but let's be real, it's coming at a cost. And that cost, because of the PS4 Pro being so underpowered, is what I just laid out, right? Next news article has to do, and this is the last one here, with the 10 VR commandments. And this article is on techradar.com. It's called, the 10 VR commandments, the rules every virtual reality gamer should follow. And I thought this would be a good discussion point to kind of end the news segment with. I agree with some of the commandments, but also I kind of want to just flesh them out a little bit. So the first one, basically, thou shalt limit the bounds of player space. And they're basically just talking about make sure you accommodate the style of locomotion in the game. So if it's teleportation predominantly, set up your scenes and your set pieces for teleportation to actually work fairly seamlessly and be realistic. It's why certain games like Doom, for example, teleportation just wouldn't work. The pacing is all off. The level design isn't really suited for that style. So definitely agree with that one. Second one, thou shalt recall that not every sense works. And I agree with that as well. And what they're saying is, if there's things that you can't do in a game, have reasons for those not being doable, because that kind of stuff breaks immersion. And the next one, if thine avatar sits, thou should also be sitting. I've said that time and time again. The most natural fit for VR, cockpit style games. If you're sitting in the game, you should be sitting in real life. So when you look down, your body, the in-game avatar, is doing exactly what you're doing. Definitely adds to the immersion. Thou shalt establish trust with the player. And this is more about the people around you. Nothing pisses me off more, guys, than somebody thinking they're being funny by scaring you, touching you, poking you when you have an HMD on your head. And I'm actually being serious on this one, even though I'm kind of chuckling. It does piss me off because A, it ruins the immersion. B, it can scare the crap out of you. You could damage the person around you if you flail out in fright. Or, hell, you could damage something in your room or the HMD itself. Don't scare people when they have the HMD on their head. If you're a haunted house and that's your whole shtick, fine, do it. But don't do it to your buddies. It's a dick move. It is not a cool thing. Thy gloves are thy friends. And here the author was basically saying that gloves are a better solution right now than having just one template hand. And it's so true. You might have whatever vision of your avatar in-game, but then when you look at your hands and the skin tone is totally off, I mean, unless you purposely, that's how you picture your character in an RPG. Maybe darker skin tone and you have lighter skin tone, fine. But maybe the sex is off. This is your tough, larger-than-life barbarian character, and he's got slender female hands. Not that a woman can't be a barbarian, but you're picturing him as a male. It's that kind of stuff. Yes, gloves is a cheap, easy solution, whether it's a spacesuit or some other kind of prop to retain the immersion, because that can throw you off. And the next one ties right into that when it talks about legs. How many VR games have you played where you look down and you don't see legs? And it's freaking disconcerting. It ruins the immersion. For me anyways. It throws me right out when I look down and I don't see legs. Thou shalt cast out unworthy menus. I agree. If it's not needed, let people interact with the environment. You can do a lot in VR that you used to need a menu for, or an inventory system like in an RPG, that now you can actually do. And Onward is a perfect example of that. The way they work with that tool belt. You don't need to unequip weapons in a menu. No, you actually do it more or less like you would in real life, which is very, very cool. Next up, thine kingdom need not be realistic. I agree. In fact, for me, the more fantastical, the more out of the ordinary the setting or the location, the more immersed and in wonder I can be with the experience. And Gnomes and Goblins is a perfect example of that yesterday. Moss Eisley, that demo, another perfect example where fantastical is a benefit. And then the last one here, thou shalt rest only when sound is also worthy. I've talked about this so many times on the channel. It's one of the things that's so often neglected, and it's been neglected, in my opinion, since Creative Labs stopped being a player in the industry. Once sound went to integrated on motherboards with the 7.1, which still isn't as good as a really good high quality Sound Blaster card, in my opinion, and I'm, again, no audiophile. Yeah, audio is always just an afterthought, and it has the potential to add so much to the immersion factor on VR. It shouldn't be, the neglected stepchild. It needs to be front and center, along with locomotion, to really immerse the player in the VR experience. My opinion. All right, guys, that's it for this news chunk. I've got a horror game coming up, Elevator, that X-Lord B has mentioned to me a couple of times. And probably, like I say, a tutorial one. And Onward is still coming. I was just going to quickly throw out what I'm going to try to do, what I'm working on, is having a game set up with my buddies. The random groups, it just doesn't work for what I want to do with the part 2, with the video. I don't want to just, I want to be able to interact a little bit, and doing it with my buddies, I'll be able to do that. So that's going to be coming up this week as well. All right, guys, as always, cheers, and definitely catch you on the VR flip side.